The intention of my case study was to pit the film All Good Things against the documentary series The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, so that I could compare how the same story could be told through two different lenses. Both are stories told with motion pictures, and both are from the same directing producing team of Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling. Through comparison, I thought I might be able to see more clearly the differences in filmmaking and how the story of All Good Things became another Hollywood flop, while The Jinx broke new ground and achieved wide critical acclaim and popular success. I wanted to be able to visually compare the two different treatments side by side to highlight the differences between the two. Just by placing the two together on the same screen, I learned a few things that I hadn't expected and had to backtrack my assumptions. The differences are stark, but I think the failure of All Good Things to connect with an audience goes deeper than what meets the eye. Based on the life of New York real estate heir Robert Durst, the screenplay fiction All Good Things, credited to Mark Smerling and Marcus Hinchley, ultimately wanted to provide a credible explanation to the mysteries surrounding Durst, including two murders and the unsolved disappearance of his wife. I found a clip of director Andrew Jarecki saying in an interview that he believed their narrative inventions in All Good Things would perhaps enable audiences to better understand Durst and his relationships with his wife and father.
We're not trying to make a documentary, we're trying to make a film that takes you on a journey and brings you someplace emotionally that's powerful and that forces you to rethink some of your perceptions or makes you look inside yourself.
I came at it with a preconceived idea that All Good Things was all formula. As defined in Professor Buchbinder's Biology of Story course, formula happens when it involves calculating a narrative based on certain response triggers. I thought they wanted to tightly control the making of the film for desired effect. But I think I've come to realize that the most important question to ask in this case is, do we believe the story? Both All Good Things and The Jinx are asking the audience to suspend their disbelief while they present information using the same cinematic delivery method of visuals, careful editing, and music.
I did not kill my best friend. I did dismember him.
Belief allows us to act as if a story is true. All Good Things may have had everything going for it as a story, but the Hollywood tropes employed to tell it kept the audience at a distance. Could more improvisation have helped? As much as filmmakers claim to want to capture the truth through extensive research, it seems that imagination alone cannot be enough to bring details to life. The project required their imaginations to apply some formulas and stitch together a Frankenstein of various departmental concerns, but they need something else, a soul. They altered names, dates, situations, while trying to fit it into a feature film box. The distributor sold it as a psychological thriller. As Professor Buchbinder aptly described in the course, sometimes it's just up to casting and marketing to provide a few jolts for the thing to stagger through opening weekend before falling off a cliff. The $20 million All Good Things took in a total worldwide take of only $644,535 USD for its entire run. As Buchbinder further said, formula narratives have a tendency to come up short on the discovery of meaning and thus become forgettable. It won't mean anything to us if we don't believe it. It's complicated. The making of story goes far beyond the simple mechanics of translating a life into a screenplay or transforming pages full of words into a cinematic experience on the screen. Was it formula that pushed it off a cliff? If so, what was the formula? I think one way I've come to identify formula is if something strikes me as cliche or just not believable. To illustrate my point, I want to consider the opening credits for All Good Things with and without the commentary track and the pre-opening sequence for Part 2 of the Jinx. In All Good Things, the Super 8 home movies is suggested to be the old man's memory. This is a familiar Hollywood movie trope to denote the past. The piano music adds melancholy. As an audience member, even though it's made to appear nostalgic, there's an emptiness because deep down we know somehow these are actors. And for the most part, this scene is only functioning as a slow, expository credit sequence. There's a telling bit of foreshadowing with the child's gun and the mother's reaction at the end. The recruitment of A-list actors Ryan Gosling, Kirsten Dunst, and Frank Langella may have pleased the movie's investors, but it did not really help in affecting the story with more reality. However, All Good Things sparked the journey for a new project when it gained Jarecki the unlikely trust of the real-life Robert Durst, who just loved the movie. He was even inspired to call and congratulate Jarecki. Despite having previously refused to cooperate, Jarecki managed to convince Durst to sit down and record a bonus commentary track with him for the Blu-ray release of the movie. This became the setting for a kind of dress rehearsal for the Jinx. The same sepia-soaked home movies, this time with Durst's commentary track, adds a decidedly creepy effect.
I'm sorry.
With the added voiceover,
past.
the movie is an entirely different experience.
This brings tears to my eyes. This was pretty much the way it was. There were just more people around, and there was the dog that I'd had since I was a little boy, a big collie named Charlie. And my mother had dark skin and was super tall.
Your mother's name was Bernice?
Yes, Bernice Herstein. I did like guns when I was a kid, I remember that.
Now it's going somewhere different than the previous version did. The authenticity of the moment dispels the trickery. They're talking about the trickery now, and how it relates to their lives. This unintended mashup becomes its own story, and it inspired further conversations between them. At one point, Durst and Jarecki bonded over having domineering fathers and realized that they shared a kind of guilt of having a family business over their heads.
You know, I always saw your dad in researching the movie as a little bit like my dad.
I think it was this precise moment of trust and simpatico that started this strange and fortuitous friendship for Jarecki. Durst's real-life father was apparently a tiny, polite, if eccentric man, described as a sweetheart. Not like the menacing character Frank Langella played him out to be in All Good Things. But Jarecki himself, it turns out, had an intimidating dad. Jarecki's father is the larger-than-life businessman Henry Jarecki, and he apparently pressured Andrew once to join the family firm. This situation resembles the one that pits Ryan Gosling's character against Frank Langella's in All Good Things. The character of Seymour Durst, Robert's father, was reimagined for effect in the form of a movie heavy, another formula. It took some of the darkness off of Gosling's character in the film. Andrew Jarecki clearly found connection here to his own experience. Interestingly, while most of the fictional characters were made up to look similar to their original counterparts, Google Images reveal that Jarecki's father looks more like Frank Langella in the movie than Robert's dad, Seymour Durst, ever did. The Jinx, in sharp contrast to All Good Things, was all about including the process, with all its messy uncertainty. Throughout the series, the filmmakers inserted themselves into the narrative not to achieve a certain style, but to be factual with the interconnectedness of the story. The making of the Jinx is part of the story. I thought it succeeded because the filmmakers changed their previous approach, and instead of scripting so rigidly, they told a story that wanted itself to be told. They allowed for the narrative to organize itself, and they worked with it harmoniously instead of trying to shape it too much. They followed what's called in the biology of story as the destiny of story. They employ the same cinematic vocabulary to the fact-based media they are editing, and as an audience member, we have an easier time believing the story because of the familiar documentary tropes employed. This time for the opening of the Jinx, Part 2, the authentic archival Super 8 home movie footage is used. The eye can really tell the difference. The sequence is carefully edited for dramatic effect, with its use of archival sound and subtitles.
Yes, sir.
And how did she die?
She died a violent death.
Now watch what happens when they are placed side by side.
Would you, for the record, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your name?
Robert Durst.
Mr. Durst, when were you born?
April 12th, 1943.
And where were you born?
New York City.
Who was your father?
Seymour Durst.
And your mother?
Bernice Durst.
Is your father still alive?
No, sir.
Is your mother still alive?
No, sir.
How old were you when your mother died?
7.
Were you present when she died?
Yes, sir.
And how did she die?
She died a violent death.
I've come to realize this. A good filmmaker, as a storyteller, has a skill set that can be applied to fiction or documentary. Manipulation and drama seems to work better for documentary. Realism and improvisation seems to work better for fiction. Andrew Jarecki's Strix, as a filmmaker, didn't change from one project to another. It was the material that he had to work with that was different.